Hey guys, thank you for joining me for day 2 of painting our Amaryllis Bulb in watercolor. I'm getting prepped here, the drawing that we did yesterday. I'm taping it down to my board, and I'll show you I'm getting my paint colors together here in a second. Alrighty. This is my art organizer book, and I'll tell you guys about that in another video later, but it keeps me organized as an artist. And that's where I swatch the paints I'm going to be using in each painting. And I'll go through what I'm using. The first one is Daniel Smith Sap Green. Then we have Winsor Newton Hooker's Green. Then Daniel Smith Buff Titanium. Daniel Smith Nickel Azo Yellow. Mission Gold Raw Umber is this dark brown. And the next one is Daniel Smith Greenish, or German Greenish Raw Umber. Love that color. Then we have Daniel Smith Quinacridone Burnt Scarlet, and we use a whole bunch of that in this painting. Then we'll also be using Daniel Smith Quinacridone Purple. And you won't see me swatch it here, but I also end up using Daniel Smith Cascade Green and Daniel Smith Moonglow during this video. The painting I did in this video took me like over 2 hours, but I've got it edited down to about 20 minutes for you guys, so you're welcome. I've got a lot of it, I've got most of it in fast forward. There, I've got the information filled out on my book so I won't forget it later. And let's get started. I'm going to start with the leaves, or the stalks, or whatever you call them, here at the top, the green stalks at the top. I'm going to lay down a whole bunch of water so that I can do my lower layer as being a wash. And I'm just taking that down to where the stalks go into like a lighter color and into the roots at the top. This is Sap Green that I'm laying in. I'm working on the forward stalk first, the one on the left. And I'll do both of them similarly, but I'll start light to dark with the Sap Green, then work into the Hooker's Green. I'll even use some of the German Greenish Raw Umber and Cascade Green, and at the end of working on these stalks, you'll see me put in some Moonglow for the shadow. There's when I went a little fast and loose with my water, so I had to sop some of it up on the edge there. Sometimes I make my washes just a little bit too wet, so I have to correct that. And a lot of painting is just correcting and going back and fixing and fussing. And what I'm doing there is taking the water out of my brush and lifting off some of the color to try to get some texture in there and highlights in there of the lines in that stalk or leaf. And I'm going, you'll see as I'm painting, I'm going in the direction of the growth of the leaf. Well, everything in the painting really. I go with the direction of the growth if possible, and that's going to help me get those lines in there, those subtle lines that those stalks have. So that sap green at the bottom is going to show through some from me lifting, and that's going to give it a little bit of brightness in between the ridges in the leaf where the higher points are darker. And there you can see doing basically the same thing, just back and forth, trying to get the colors right and keep as much texture in there as I can. Now that I'm working on the second stalk, the right hand side, I'm showing you that's where I'm adding in some Cascade Green. Because I want that darkness on that side. The light in the reference photo is coming from the upper left, and I want that to show in my final piece. You can see why it took so long for me to paint, because I spend a lot of time on each section. Now I'm starting on the right hand stalk. Again, with sap green in the bottom, I end up using very little of the nickel Azo Yellow. Not as much as I thought I would be using. This sap green is quite bright enough even when lifted, so that works out for me. And as I'm painting this and trying to get the lines in and the texture and the color and all the things, it appears to me like I have made these stalks a little whiter than what is in the reference photo, and I'm okay with it. It's fine. I do try to do as much to the reference as possible, and I'm also trying to show that shadow in there and highlight and texture again and again. And when these colors dry, they're going to dry lighter. Watercolor always does that. So it dries a different color than what it looks like when you've painted it. So this looks very, very bright, super springy green, but you'll see it will dull down as it dries. And that's why layering in watercolor is so wonderful and important, because you can glaze transparent layers over transparent layers that you can't do in pretty much any other paint. Maybe oil. And here I'm pulling out some more highlights. And you can see it's started to dry there, and the color has completely dulled down, which is more accurate to the painting in my opinion anyway. You see, I keep going in the direction of growth for every stroke. So no matter how the color dries, it'll at least be in the correct direction. And then I start to pull down some of that also into where the roots start and the bulbs start here shortly. This is me adding more shadow to the right hand side, so they show as separate stalks or leaves, but also the dimension, trying to make them look more and more 3D. And that all depends on how the light source in the reference is. So now I'm starting on the bulb itself, and I'm using the Quinacridone Burnt Scarlet. And a lot like in the stalks, I tend to do a light lower layer and then work up from that. But also, if you look close in the reference, the sort of leaves that wrap around on the bulb are showing in separate sections, and that's how I'm going to paint it, so that hopefully in the end it looks realistic and the texture of those leaves wrapping around look realistic. Leaves, it's like a wrapping, like onion peel, the peel, so there are many of them, and the edges of those are showing up towards the top, and that's what I'm going to try to separate those sections to show that, and show that they are different layers. So that's the center. And then I will start on the left hand side. So that's like a peel of its own. First I might put more texture in that, yeah. So I'm building up in the middle, putting more texture in. And doing the color on my brush is pretty dry because I don't want it to get wet and roam around. Now you see that color changed darker as it dried. But it's also due to my lighting in the studio because it got later. And I'm showing you the section I'm painting from with that Quinacridone Burnt Scarlet and Quinacridone Purple on my Messy palette. Now I'm starting on the left hand side, the peel or leaf on that side. And again, I'm going to go lighter to darker in the direction of growth. I'm imagining everything on here growing upwards and trying to keep it pretty linear in my brush strokes. I'm doing my burnt scarlet, and then I'm gradually adding the Quinacridone purple in mixes, and also getting drier and drier color as I'm building up and creating texture. Because I want those layers that I'm putting down to show and not bloom out or, wash over too much. The skins on this bulb are very, very textured, and that's what I'm going to try to get across in the highlights and lowlights of, is that right? Of the work. You'll see on the left hand side of the bulb, outside of the highlight from the light, it's pretty dark. And so I'm going to try to portray that while not interfering with that highlight too much. It's going to, has to gradually go from dark to light for all of them. So today I'm going to get that middle and the two sides done, and then tomorrow we'll work on the roots. And that'll probably be a shorter video because I'm not going to make you watch me paint every single one of those tiny roots. They're wild. And while I enjoy painting them and it's very relaxing, I don't know that everyone would appreciate watching me paint every single one of those little guys. And we'll also have to work on the darkness of the bottom of the bulb, working into those roots and underneath those roots. So that'll be an interesting challenge as well. And this whole time I'm adding texture, adding darkness where I need it, trying to paint only what I see, not what I think should be there. And tomorrow I'll also show you in the leaves or the stalks. I'm not really satisfied with how one part of it came out, so I'm going to attempt to correct it by lifting. You'll see tomorrow, or whenever you watch the video. You can see how slow I'm going if this is like 2 to 3 times the speed of what I really painted it. But I think it shows pretty well what it is I'm trying to do. And now the right hand side, that peel or leaf, whatever you want to call it. There's a darkness in between each one of those peels and a highlight in between each one of those peels. And so I'm trying to be careful to keep out what I need to, but portray what I need to as well, so that that texture shows and that dimension shows. But I also don't want to go too dark too fast. And you'll see me go back to other sections once they've, dried a little bit, so that I'm not working too wet. And here's where I'm pulling down some of that green to go under those crusty bits of the root there. I just wanted that to be a little more homogeneous there, so I've just pulled it down from what the color that's already existing there, with not too much water. And then while I was doing that, this one dried a little bit, so I could work into it a little bit more. And that's how I go from section to section, trying to, keep them separate. And I do that with all plants. I try to do separate sections whenever possible and go from large shapes to smaller shapes. And that just helps my brain compartmentalize what I need to do in the painting. And I'm still trying to get better and better every day, but this is how I do it. This is pretty much what I'm going to get done today. Tomorrow, we're going to look at those roots and how we're going to tackle that. Thank you for coming. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.